Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Davis, and I am Director of Development here at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight for such an important anniversary and important event. We're really pleased to have you all here with us. Each year on November 7th, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation marks National Day for the Victims of Communism, to remember those who have suffered and died at the hands of communist regimes in the past, and to stand for those who are fighting for freedom today. So thank you all for joining us for such an important commemoration. I do have some exciting news to share that we just learned at the start of our event. We are really proud that our friends in Wisconsin have just passed today a resolution marking today as Victims of Communism Memorial Day. So very proud that that's the 8th state to recognize today. Yes. So now I'd like to turn it over to Ambassador Andrew Brimberg, President of VOC.
Thank you, Ashley. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, ambassadors, and partners from our organizations that we've worked with on this great event. I'm happy to welcome everyone to our International Cultural and Food Fair to commemorate Victims of Communism Memorial Day. And as Ashley mentioned, I'm so thrilled that we've added an 8th state today that will commemorate this every year going forward. Before we get started, I'd just like to say a word of special thanks to all of the embassies and partner organizations who are taking part in this important event. I'd also like to thank our co-hosts, the Florida International University in Washington and the Václav Havel Program for Human Rights and Democracy at FIU's Stevens Green School of International and Public Affairs, as well as our sponsor, the Havana Club. Every year on November 7th, we gather to remember and honor the more than 100 million people who have lost their lives due to communism, and also recognize the 1.5 billion people who are still living under communist regimes today. Together, we remember, and while we may feel sad, we also recognize the need to celebrate the strength of culture and of the human spirit. In this celebration, we find hope for a better future. This hope is different than of the false hope offered by communism. We remember our traditions and the people who came before us, which makes us different from those who want everyone to be the same. Culture and food are closely connected. There's no better place to celebrate community and belonging than at a dinner table, surrounded by family and friends. The way we prepare and enjoy what is offered by the land around us makes us who we are. When we sit down together for a meal, we honor those who came before us and commemorate traditions that get passed on from one generation to the next. This idea was not liked by the leaders of the Soviet Union, Maoist China, or other communist regimes. They sought to get rid of national traditions and ethnic cultures and statehood to make way for their idea of the communist man. They replaced dinner tables with cafeteria lines, home kitchens with industrial food plants, and regional cuisine with standardized meals. Communist governments have always had a kind of strange relationship with food. Even when there was enough food, which wasn't the case a lot of the times, the recipes created by the Institute of Nutrition and the Academy of Medical Sciences of the USSR were not all that to be desired. Anastas Mikoyan, who was in charge of the food industry for the Soviet Union, imagined the ideal communist man eating foods like sturgeon in jelly, cabbage soup, liver cake, and buckwheat groats. Canned food, and quite surprisingly for me to learn, a lot of ice cream. In fact, apparently Mikoyan was so obsessed with ice cream that once Stalin said, "Anastas, you care more about ice cream than about communism." I wish that was true for more communists. But of course, unfortunately for us, we know that the communists cared much more about enforcing communism than they did about making quality food. Soviets changed the way people ate. They stole the harvests and the best local produce from occupied lands that left their people with simple resources or not enough. The purpose was to keep the machinery of the state going. Food was a resource, from something wonderful and flavorful to just empty calories. Attempts to create communist cuisine failed because there wasn't enough food or resources and because it lacked anything meaningful. Yet still, the old culinary traditions and ethnic cuisines withstood the oppression, and small communities of dissidents intent on remembering the past were preserved for future generations to come. It is in that same spirit today, working with various embassies and ethnic partner organizations, that we have the unique opportunity to show a cultural richness of more than 20 countries and ethnic communities that have been or still are under the harsh realities of communism. Tonight, we share unique food and drink. As we do so, let this be a celebration of the human spirit that resists and survives oppression. We are not just tasting food and drink. We are also honoring the experiences of these nations and their unique histories and cultures and traditions that they have and continue to fight for today. Tonight, we have the privilege to hear from two remarkable individuals that Ashley will introduce, and we'll also hear from representatives of many of the states where Victims of Communism Memorial Day has been recognized. We hope this event starts and continues conversations, inspires action, and helps to ensure that the victims of communism are never forgotten. In closing, I'd like to invite you to continue to tour the museum, to think and to remember. As we enjoy tonight's experiences, let us also take a moment to honor the lives lost and those still living under oppression. And remember the strength of all those who have survived and stood for freedom. Thank you so much for joining us at this important event this evening. And I'm sure together we can continue to fight for the day where there are no more victims of communism. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Brimberg. We are honored to have Gary Powers Jr. here to offer remarks about the importance of Victims of Communism Memorial Day. Gary is the son of Francis Gary Powers Sr., CIA U-2 pilot who was shot down in the midst of the Cold War while flying in Soviet airspace. Gary is the author of Enemy Territory, Spy Pilot, and Letters from a Soviet Prison. He's the founder and chairman emeritus of the Cold War Museum located at Mint Hill, Virginia, and was the chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee for the Cold War themed study, which assisted the National Park Service to identify historic Cold War sites for preservation. So thank you, Gary, for being with us today.
Appreciate that. All right. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, elected officials, esteemed guests, and fellow advocates of historical preservation and education, especially all the trustees and the board members, as well as the staff members of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Thank you for gathering here today as we talk about a topic of utmost significance: the importance of educating future generations about the devastations caused by communism. We stand at a crucial juncture in history where the lessons we impart to the upcoming generations will shape their understanding of the world's complexities and the ideals that underpin our democratic societies. The 20th century bore witness to unprecedented upheavals under communist rule by such figures as Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Walter Ulbricht. They stand as a stark reminder of the potential consequences of ideological extremism. The human toll, the erosions of freedom, and the economic inefficiencies wrought by communist regimes are scars etched into our collective histories. During the Cold War era, it is estimated that tens of millions of people perished under communist regimes. These statistics represent not just numbers, but individual lives filled with dreams and aspirations that were cut short by the oppressive machinery of communism. It is our moral duty to ensure that these lessons are not forgotten. Otherwise, we risk repeating the mistakes of the past. Communism, often characterized as by authoritarian rule, silencing of dissent, and planned economies, led to unimaginable horrors during this period. Citizens lived under constant surveillance, with their thoughts and expressions controlled by the state. The devastating consequences of communism include famines, forced labor camps, and mass executions, leaving countless families shattered and communities scarred. For example, Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union from the mid-20s to his death in 1953, is a chilling example of the horrors of communism. Under his rule, the Great Purge, better known as the Great Terror, took place. Stalin's regime systematically eliminated perceived enemies of the state through mass executions, forced labor camps, and show trials. The scale of the suffering was immense, with millions of Soviet citizens falling victim to this ruthless campaign. The forced creation of collective farms under Stalin's rule also led to the Ukrainian Holodomor famine in 1932 to 1933. This was one of the most devastating man-made famines in history. Millions of Ukrainians perished due to the deliberate policies of the Soviet government. They confiscated the grain and the food from the Ukrainian peasants, leaving them to starve. Another horrifying aspect of communism is the Gulag system. Countless individuals, including political dissidents, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens, were sent to these camps under often arbitrary charges. These camps were notorious for their inhumane conditions, where prisoners were subjected to grueling labor, starvation, and brutal treatment. The stories of those who suffered in the gulags remind us of the horrors of state-sponsored repression. The Soviet Union is but one example. Let us not forget the Great Chinese Famine, which resulted from the policies of the Great Leap Forward under Mao Zedong. His rule between 1959 and 1961 is when this famine happened. It is estimated that 15 to 45 million people perished due to the combination of factors, including forced collective farms and misguided economic policies. Families were torn apart, and individuals faced severe hunger and deprivation. And what about the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, when Walter Ulbricht was head of the state for East Germany? The wall serves as one of the most visible symbols of the divisions caused by communism. Erected by the German Democratic Republic, which was under Soviet influence, the wall was a physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain that separated East and West Berlin. Families were torn apart, and its citizens were denied their basic freedoms. They were trapped behind concrete and barbed wire. The Berlin Wall stands as a stark reminder of the lengths to which communist regimes will go to maintain control and suppress dissent. The East German government, with the support of the Soviet Union, implemented strict border controls and security measures to prevent the citizens from escaping to the West. This included guard towers, barbed wire, minefields, shoot to kill orders for border guards, all collectively known as the death strip between East and West Berlin. While exact figures vary, it is estimated that at least 140 people were killed attempting to cross the Berlin Wall between 1961 and 1989. However, this number does not account for those who died in other escape attempts along the broader East German, West German border. The total number of fatalities related to escape attempts from East Germany during the Cold War is likely higher. It's important to note that the Berlin Wall and the border between East and West Germany were some of the most heavily fortified and dangerous areas during the Cold War. Many individuals risked their lives in desperate attempts to seek freedom to the West. In this noble pursuit to preserve history, institutions like the Cold War Museum and the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, they shine as beacons of remembrance and enlightenment. The Cold War Museum stands as a testament to the struggles and sacrifices of Cold War veterans who valiantly defended our democratic values. It provides a tangible connection to history, offering visitors a first-hand glimpse into the challenges and triumphs of that era. The veterans' stories must be passed down to future generations in order to serve as a reminder that freedom is not to be taken for granted. Crucial is the work undertaken by the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. By establishing monuments and educational programs, the foundation honors the memories of those who suffered under oppressive regimes. Through their initiatives, the foundation imparts the profound lessons of history and promotes a more informed and discerning citizenry. By understanding the consequences of communism and the staggering loss of life during the Cold War, we empower future leaders to make informed decisions that safeguard our democratic values and principles. Educating students about the horrors of communism is a vital endeavor. The classroom is where young minds are shaped and where critical thinking is nurtured. By integrating the historical narrative of communism and the Cold War and its victims, we equip students with the tools to analyze complex situations, distinguish fact from ideology, and appreciate the significance of freedom. However, this task is not without challenges. It requires the commitments from everyone in this room, the ambassadors, the elected officials, educators, policymakers, as well as civil society as a whole, to overcome potential biases that manifest through the excessive political extremism. This is necessary in order to present a balanced perspective. It also demands that we foster an environment where open dialogue is encouraged and the differing viewpoints are respected. This will foster a generation capable of navigating the nuances of our world. In closing, let us remember that the torch of remembrance and education must be passed from one generation to the next. The lessons of history, from the horrors of communism and the tremendous loss of life it caused during the 20th century, to the importance of free discourse, are not isolated relics. They are living truths that shape our present and our future. As we salute the efforts of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, let us also pledge to do our part in preserving the lessons of the past, honoring the sacrifices of those who came before us, and paving the way for a brighter, freer world. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today, and I appreciate all the efforts you're doing to make sure that history does not be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. We appreciate it. We are also honored to have here with us today Representative Ben Toma, the Majority Leader in the Arizona House of Representatives, here to speak about his family's experience living under the Ceausescu regime in Romania. VOC was proud earlier this year to help produce a video documentary of Representative Toma's story in partnership with the University of Arizona's Center for the Philosophy of Freedom as part of a 3-film series for the center's oral history collection. And you can find his documentary episode on our website. So thank you for being with us, Representative Toma.
Thank you for the invite and for the opportunity to be here. And, for me, I guess it's important to get the personal kind of human story of what happened. And so I'll start at the beginning. I was born in 1978 in the city of Cluj, Romania, which is the capital of Transylvania. And as my parents were finishing up college, the communist system at the time was that if you were first in your class, you got first choice in terms of where you were going to go and get placed in your work. However, my father and mother, but my father in particular in this case, was the wrong kind of Christian, and so which was not approved by the communist system, and so he inexplicably, although he was first in his class, he got the last pick, which was, as you know, and I think was mentioned before, the collective farms were mentioned before. The communist system was to take all private property, centralize all the land, and create these large collective farms. It was actually called collectiv in Romanian. But anyway, and so my dad's job was, as an agricultural engineer, that was his title. His job was to effectively run this farm. Now, it was supposed to be 4 years of internship, and then if you were halfway capable, you got your own appointment after that. But the guy he was there to intern under got sick, and within just a few months was gone. And so you have a 23, 24-year-old just out of college that is now running the entire town for all practical purposes. And pretty much everybody worked there. And here's the other thing about communism. Nobody cares if you're incompetent. That's perfectly acceptable. But the minute you are competent, it attracts attention, and of course the wrong kind of attention. I still remember it took my dad a few years, and he got help from others that were willing to teach him some things. But he turned that town around from being the last in his district, in his county, if you will. He came to, I think he was number 3 by the time I was 7 years old. And again, once you're capable, it's the blade that sticks up that gets cut, right? Or the nail that sticks up that gets hammered, that sort of thing. And so we started getting attention from very strange people. And I still remember as a little child, 7 years old, strange people showing up at our house. In communist Romania, especially in a small town at the time, there was, very few people had cars, had ways to get around. You couldn't even travel unless you had the authority of the police to do so from town to town. And so these men would show up, and they were the secret police, and we knew who they were. And they wanted to talk to mom and dad, and they would stay and talk to mom and dad late into the night. And then they would come more often. And I still remember them showing up. We lived in a small town, it was a different time, but we were home alone. And they would show up and wait in the room with us until mom and dad came home. Super creepy, by the way, if you're a parent thinking about it back now. And after a little while, mom and dad came and told us that they're going to go on vacation. And we said, okay, well, that's not entirely unheard of. But so they went on vacation, and it became clear that they were not coming back. After a few weeks, my grandma came by and our aunts and uncles, and they parceled us out. I was the oldest, again, at 7. I had a sister that was 2 years younger, a brother that was just about 2.5, and a brother that was 1.5 at the time. And while they were doing that, they found on the back of one of the paintings, that was hanging on the wall, they found a letter from my parents. And the letter said that they were going to go on vacation, and that they were not going to come back, and that they were going to apply for asylum and try to get out and try to get us out as soon as they could. And sure enough, that's what they did. They visited the country of Jordan. They were allowed to leave to Jordan. It took them a long time to get the approval to leave the country at all in the first place. But they were not allowed to take the children. And even that was an act of God in terms of the way that was approved. But they went to Jordan. They applied for the asylum in the United States. The United States kept them in a refugee camp in Istanbul for about 7.5 months. And then they moved them a little bit to Greece, and then another 3 months out of Rome. And then eventually they made their way to the United States. During this entire time, we didn't know what was going on. We would get sometimes a postcard from them. It was very, very short. The reason they left the letter, by the way, that's important. Remember, this is the secret police. If anybody knew what they were doing, if anybody was suspected of having known of what they were doing, you would disappear, never be seen again. Ceausescu was brutal. I'm sure most of you are aware of the fact that in Romania, he did not want to let go at the end when it was clear that communism was falling everywhere else behind the Iron Curtain. And so eventually that ended in a kind of a bloody coup, if you will. But in any case, it was understandable that our parents did not want to subject any of the family members to knowing anything about what they were doing, because that would have meant effectively a death sentence in every way. Anyhow, communists showed up at I just turned 9, it was 1987 at this point, and showed up at my grandma's house and handed her 4 passports and said, here are the passports for the kids. They have to be out of the country in 5 days. And the US government didn't know we were coming. My grandma took us to the airport in Bucharest and put us on a plane to JFK. My parents lived in Portland at the time, so the only person that did wait for us was a TWA employee who was the connecting flight. And finally, TWA actually listened to my parents. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened. We would have gotten off the plane in JFK and didn't know what to do as four little kids. I didn't speak any English. None of us did. But the gentleman was very nice, took us through the process, helped us onto the next plane. I still remember this. It's funny what you remember as a little kid. Some things are just etched in your memory and you just remember in very vivid details. But I remember that plane was a giant 747, because everything's big in America compared to back in Romania. And it was largely empty, and it was a flight that went from JFK over to Seattle, and then the little short hop to Portland where my parents were. Well, we, four slap-happy little kids that had just come across the ocean, jet-lagged and whatnot. We're running around the plane, irritating everybody in sight. And again, God works in mysterious ways. There was a gentleman there that happened to be Romanian on that flight that was going to Seattle. He heard us talking, and he told us off, and then he asked, well, how dare you? Where are your parents? Type of thing. Why you're acting like this? But that was a huge act of mercy, because in him doing that, we were able to explain who we were and what we were doing. And we were telling him, we were the ones that told him we were going to Portland, and he stopped us from getting off the plane in Seattle. Remember, this is pre-9/11. You can get off and on the plane. It was a lot easier than it is now. I can't even imagine my poor parents, what would have happened if we would have gotten off the plane in Seattle and how long it would have taken to find us at that point. Again, nobody spoke English. Remember that. 9-year-old, 7-year-old, 5-year-old, and 4-year-old at the time. Anyway, we got there okay. We were reunited with our parents. And I'm here to tell you that our parents did what they did. And it was, thinking back at it now, especially now since I'm a father myself, I can see how much of a sacrifice my parents made and how much of a risk they took in order to get here and to keep us safe and to give us the opportunities that I know many of you share similar stories. Either your grandparents or your parents or you yourselves have made similar sacrifices. But they did it because America is a city on a hill, and America is the land of opportunity. And I am living proof that is true. And while our story ended well in the sense that we were reunited and we did live the American dream, and now I serve as the Speaker of the House in Arizona, the truth is, for unfortunately millions, and I've heard as high as 100 million people, that is not the case. They lost their lives to the evils of communism. So it is my honor, and it was my honor, to partner with the gentleman who I now have appointed as the Judiciary Chair in Arizona, Representative Quang Nguyen of Vietnam, who was on one of the last flights out of Saigon himself. Him and I sponsored a bill last session to teach making it mandatory to teach the evils of communism to Arizona high schoolers. And so now it is imperative, and it is actually a legal requirement, that the evils of communism are taught in Arizona schools, because people need to know. All this cancel culture, all this revisionist history has got to stop. Communism is evil. Fundamentally, it is evil. I understand why it's attractive to some, but the bottom line is it doesn't work. It hasn't worked in Asia. It obviously hasn't worked in Europe. It doesn't work in Central America. Everybody that's there is trying to figure out a way to get out. And that should tell you something. It is evil. It needs to be called that. I want to thank the foundation for the work you're doing. Thank you for this museum. And just consider that you have, and count on us, that you have a friend in the Arizona legislature. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Representative Toma. Stories like yours and many of you here with us today are so crucial in the work that we're doing at BOC to educate students, especially, but people all over the world, about the evils of communism, just as you were saying. So thank you. In closing, we will hear video messages from representatives of many of the states around the country who have passed a resolution to mark today, November 7th, as Victims of Communism Memorial Day. Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Texas, Utah, Virginia, and now Wisconsin have all recognized this day. So we really commend these 8 states for their important work in recognizing Victims of Communism Memorial Day.
Hello, this is Coach Tommy Tuberville, U.S. Senator for the great state of Alabama. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the Victims of Communism Foundation. Alabama is one of the states that has declared November the 7th Victims of Communism Memorial Day. In just 100 years, more than 110 million people were killed by communist regimes. By any measure, communism is the bloodiest ideology in the history of the world. In fact, it's not even close. Stalin killed more people in 1937 than the Spanish Inquisition killed in 400 years. Communism leads inevitably to violence and killing. Communism is a war against reality. Communists think that politicians can turn earth into heaven. When they fail, they always find someone to blame. It's a vicious cycle we've seen from Cuba to Korea. Sadly, most Americans don't seem to know any of this. And so we need the Victims of Communism Foundation. We need you to be successful. We need you to educate the American people. We need to honor the 100 million people killed by communists in the 20th century. We owe it to them to defeat communism once and for all. So thank you, and God bless you and your very important work.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Kat Cammack of Florida. We in Florida stand in solidarity with all of the victims of communism and stand with the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation in educating Americans and people across the world on the dangers of communism. The 20th century is ripe with gross displays of communism in action and the tragedies that this evil ideology inflicted on innocent people on a global scale. As Reagan famously said, "I have seen the rise of fascism and communism. Both philosophies glorify the arbitrary power of the state, but both theories fail. Both deny those God-given rights and liberties that are the inalienable right of each person on this planet. Indeed, they deny the existence of God." Thank you for all that you do in the name of freedom and liberty. God bless and take care.
Hello, I'm Congressman Buddy Carter, and it's my honor and privilege to represent the 1st Congressional District of Georgia. Communism has plagued our world for many years. It's a dangerous ideology, and its dangerous effects have been felt by millions of people. Today, on the International Victims of Communism Day, we take time to reflect and remember those that have been impacted by communism and its practitioners. I'm proud that just this past year, the Georgia State Legislature passed a resolution that officially acknowledges November 7th as Victims of Communism Memorial Day. This made us the 6th state in the country to officially observe this important day. Communism is evil, and it should be regarded as such. America has proudly stood as a beacon of freedom, liberty, and democracy on the world stage, and she will continue to do just that. Today is an important day, and I'm proud to be able to speak to you all today and share in this somber remembrance. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you, and as always, God bless America, and God be with the victims of communism.
Good morning. Although I'm unable to be there with you in person to commemorate this year's National Day for the Victims of Communism, I want to thank everyone at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation for your tireless efforts to recognize the more than 100 million victims of communism around the world. Thank you for standing up for human rights and for fighting for the freedom of those still living under totalitarian regimes. We live in dark times, a time of human rights abuses and atrocities by communist and totalitarian regimes all over the world. During times like this, it's more important than ever to remember that those regimes can only continue to operate in the dark, and that what they fear the most is light. The light that you at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation shine. This issue is personal to me. My father, Rafael Cruz, was a revolutionary who fought Batista's regime as a teenager simply because he wanted to be free. When he returned to Cuba after Fidel Castro regime began, his eyes were opened to the evil reality of Marxism and how it completely destroys allegiance to anything other than the state, including faith in God and devotion to family. As the son of a Cuban immigrant who came to America seeking freedom, I am so proud that Texas passed a resolution in 2021 designating November 7th as Victims of Communism Memorial Day to remember and to honor those who have suffered and who've died under communist regimes. I stand with you in the fight to end the evil that is communism and to preserve freedom. Thank you, and God bless you.
On November 7th, we mark National Day for the Victims of Communism. This day is a solemn reminder of the people who suffered and lost so much under past communist governments. It's also a way for us to support those who are currently fighting for freedom from oppressive Marxist regimes. From the Soviet Union to the Chinese Communist Party, these dictatorships are still restricting people's freedoms and self-governance. Over a century ago, when the first communist regime took power, more than 100 million people's lives were lost. We need to make sure the next generation knows about the terrible things done in the name of communism, and we should keep standing for the freedom and democracy around the world.
Hello, my name is Winsome Earl Sears, and I'm Lieutenant Governor here in our beautiful Commonwealth of Virginia. Here in Virginia, we passed a resolution recognizing the victims of communism. We thank you so much for the work that you do, and we must never forget. Thank you, and God bless you all.